good morning. Bom dia. Today I would like to share my work entitled Kampung Tugu in the Global Cultural Crossroad during the 17th to 20th centuries. My work discusses the origin of plural society and its cultural hybrids of language, fashion, food, and material culture in Kampung Tugu. Kampung Tugu seems to preserve cultural richness. We can refer to the toponyms of Tugu, which is defined variously. In the Malay or Indonesian language, Tugu means monument, allowing people to interpret that it might mark the boundaries of territory. Secondly, the Tugu is also derived from the Portuguese language of Portuguese. Lastly, people might also name it after the name of Tugu inscription written in Palava Sanskrit language dating back to the 5th century and issued by King Purnawarman of Tarumanagara. However, the inscription doesn't have a name. It might refer to the place where the inscription is found. The inscription was found in Batutumbu sub-village, Tugu village. Today, Tugu is concreted to a sub-village. Therefore, the toponym of Tugu comes from the Dutch colonial period. People started to name Tugu when 23 Indians stayed there in 1661. Historically, Tugu had welcomed both ethnic groups from Indonesia Archipelago and foreigners, Indian, Portuguese, the Dutch, and their offspring. For the people who define Tugu as monument, they might refer to the border between the Dutch colonial master and Tugu people. The Dutch had forced their slaves from Paris origin to inhabit the swamp area outside the fortress. The slaves later freed were married by the Portuguese-speaking communities named the Markijkers or Markika, succeeded in surviving because they served the colonial master and adapted easily to their surroundings. As they spoke Portuguese, the Tugu people might identify themselves as Portuguese descendants. However, the Dutch would suspect them if they admitted they were Portuguese. They wanted to be loyal to the Dutch. Therefore, they took some letter of Tugu from Portuguese. Kampung Tugu had already been studied in any aspect of life, including its history, society, language and music, fashion and food, and material culture of church and tombstone. However, all aspects of cross-cultural Tugu have been discussed, but previous scholars have merely mentioned the Tugis tombstone without identifying, documenting, analyzing them further. Instead analyzing the Tugis tombstone, this paper also revisit the hybrid identities in Kampung Tugu. They are following Anthony Reed's work, hybrid identities in the 15th century set of Malacca. There are 4 forms of hybrid identities: language, fashion, food, and material culture. Considering the availability of the literature and primary sources in the European archives, the chronicles, artifacts of the church and tombstone, and local social facts and artifacts, it is feasible to study the cross-cultural Tugu from 17th to 20th century. This work used a historical approach, allowing the researcher to find all available sources and reconstruct the narrative of the cross-cultural Tugu. Being the Portuguese in the East was not limited to the European Portuguese, but also to anyone who served and subjected himself to the Portuguese crown. Being Portuguese means exercising political dominance and behaving in a manner befitting the special status they enjoy. They emerged as a transnational community as presented by Professor João Paulo Oliveira in our first presentation. In early 16th century, Afonso de Albuquerque established this community in response to the social scarcity in the East, the Saruda India. He issued the mixed marriage policy to populate the Portuguese colonies. He encouraged the retired soldiers to marry Asian women and settle down in the East. In Milapur, India, the married and retired soldiers called the Casadus succeeded in establishing the Shadow Empire of Goa. They organized urban life and have a system autonomously. There is no captain, only a tied Catholic church and Portuguese patroado or patronage. The Portuguese community was not merely from the Portuguese descendant, but also by other groups of people who had close contact with the Portuguese, including the indigenous people and the slave freed by the Portuguese. They claimed they were Portuguese because they embraced Christianity and spoke Portuguese. They also named themselves with the Portuguese names and live as the Portuguese. In Malacca, for example, Albuquerque children remain to preserve the Portuguese culture and tradition. At least the Portuguese folk song and dance, as you already seen it, in the present day Malacca. However, the mixing with the local tradition, the Portuguese community in Kampung Tugu and the Lesser Sunda Islands, the Kopasses, could also succeed in preserving the Portuguese culture. In the case of Kampung Tugu, Daya the Tugu, the Portuguese-speaking communities had already stayed in Jayakarta before the Dutch came. They might join the Portuguese ships and trade in Jayakarta and Banten before settling in and around Jayakarta. When the Dutch occupied Jayakarta in 1619, that the Dutch renamed it to Batavia, the Mardika served as the Dutch military forces. In 1628, there were two companies of infantry from the Mardika fighting the troops of Mataram. The community grew after the Dutch captured Malacca and the other Portuguese possessions on the west coast of India. The uncertain situation forced the merchants and craftsmen living in India and Malacca to move to the prospering Batavia. These people became civil servants, shop owner, clerk in the trade offices of Batavia. Considering their survival, the Dutch gifted them the free and tax-exempted lands in the swamp area named Kampung Tugu in 1661. When the Mardika settled in Kampung Tugu, there were 23 Christians of Bengali and Coromandel origin. In 1676, the number of this family had increased to about 50. Around 100 years later, there were about 134 villagers. Other Mardikas from the villages around Batavia may have joined the original families, who numbered about 800 souls, part of the which were originally from the Portuguese community in other parts of Batavia. However, the Mardikas experienced the plague of influenza in 1700, and it resulted in death, but they could survive till today. In the last quarter of 18th century, the term of Mardikas or Mardika was rarely used in Batavia. On the other hand, another term had stuck to them, namely the Portuguese. The Dutch claim that the Portuguese community in Kampung Tugu had the same status as the other Mardikas in Batavia. Before the Dutch abolished their Batavia citizenship, in 1815, the Mardikas in Batavia agreed to disband after the last Mardika captain, Agustin Misius, died in 1833. They abandoned their Portuguese identity and blended in with the rest of Batavia society. The Dutch established their status as Kristen Bumiputra or indigenous Christian residents. However, Portuguese had their citizenship, but they kept preserving their Portuguese culture in Kampung Tugu. In the 1920s, the Portuguese communities consisted of 9 families of Abraham, Andres, Cornelis, Michel, Solomon, Simon, Wico, Sousa, and Brown. The Portuguese enjoyed their life under the Dutch master. When the Japanese expelled the Dutch, few Portuguese were left Tugu as a result of uncertain political climate for non-national citizens in the 1940s. After the independence, the Portuguese preferred to move to several countries such as the Netherlands, Suriname, and New Guinea. In 1975, the Portuguese were estimated at 500 inhabitants. The usage of the Portuguese language served as a linguistic marker of identity, where the Portuguese descendants express a continuous cultural lineage through their dialect and conversation in daily activity, reinforcing a sense of belonging or social identity. There's heritage. The Portuguese express their feeling of being Portuguese using Portuguese names. There were common personal names, for example, like Zacharias, Dominguez, Ezekiel, Evangelina, and so on. The godfather or the foster father adopted upon baptism, with the surname like Silva, Costa, and de Mayo. In addition, early Mardika surnames were Caldeiro de Villanova, conjuring up images of Portuguese grandeur. The Dutch hegemony also influenced the family names in the 18th century. Portuguese surname, for instance, Salomon, Andres, Dolores, Uico, and Makatita, who was original Moluccan name and then had been intermarried with non-Mardikas. In 1866, there was Guico and Andres, who were both teachers, but they were already more of non-Mardika origin. The Mardikas spoke Portuguese then, despite the Dutch encouraging them to learn the Dutch language. Although these Mardikas had become Protestant, the constant use of Portuguese made it necessary to retain this language for religious service. since 1634. The Calvinist preacher were forced to learn Portuguese. The Portuguese priest, João Pereira de Almeida, had already responsibility to translate and publish the first Bible in the Portuguese in 1681. Therefore, the Marhikas could understand Calvinism comprehensively. The Dutch also borrowed the Portuguese words in their language. From 16th to 17th century, the Dutch were motivated to speak Portuguese because the Portuguese dominated lucrative Asian trade networks. Even the Dutch used Portuguese as intermediate language to negotiate with the local Sundanese and Javanese. Portuguese was not merely to be the communication language between Europeans and ASEAN or between the higher and lower classes, but became the language of communication among the Asians living in Batavia. Knowing Portuguese might allow them to move freely and be an integrated part of Batavian society. However, the Batavian kept using Portuguese to communicate with each other, but they mixed it with Malay words during the 18th century. The Batavian and etc. had been speaking Dutch in the 19th century. There is a Livro de Pantos edited by Professor Hugo Cardoso, found in the library of the National Museum of Archaeology in Lisbon. The manuscript is written in Malay, Dutch, Portuguese. Considering it has 19th century handwriting style, it might come from Kampung Tugu, where strata of the Malays, Dutch, Portuguese culture existed side by side. There are 11 pantuns or poems in the manuscript. Some of them is pantun Melayu penghiburan hati duka dan pilu, pantun dari Siti Laila Maijan, and the most important thing for me, pantun Jongker. The Tugis didn't have any choice and adapted to the surrounding. They started to speak Dutch or Dutch Creole or local languages. At present, they merely know some Portuguese words restricted to commonly used words at home. Those words concern the human body, agriculture, and nature. Some lexical sources could be understood only in the context of Kampung Tugu. For instance, men merah in the sea mean north, and men seha to the mountain mean south. The other important identity from the Kampung Tugu people, the music also plays a crucial role in identity construction, facilitating cultural expression and communal ties. Music in local celebration, whether it is through formal event or casual gathering, evoke nostalgia and pride among the villagers, where the melodies and lyrics, sung in Portuguese, foster emotional connection to their ancestry. After the death of the last Portuguese speaker named Jacob Pico in 1978, the Portuguese were preserved in the form of musical lyrics. People can observe from the Rabu tradition. This tradition aims to greet Happy New Year to every relative in the village. The word Hapu comes from Portuguese, which means to follow. The habit of the resident Kampung Tugu in using the word is always repeated and better known in Indonesia as Rabu-Rabu. The Rabu-Rabu is like following the family group, which is stop by and must join the group to visit the next house. It is called Rabu-Rabu because the host should follow the visitor and sing the keroncong together. And of course, the line gets longer. This tradition is held on the 1st of January every year and starts around 10 p.m. The equipment used is keroncong music instrument, including tamborin and guitar. The community around Kampung Tugu support appreciate this tradition. There is no change from time to time in the process of implementing this tradition. The current Rabu-Rabu can be implemented in a day because fewer people are living in Kampung Tugu right now. In the past, this tradition could be carried out for 2 or 3 days. The Rabu-Rabu tradition is commonly followed by another tradition called the Mandi Mandi, after the keroncong song title of Mandi Mandi. It is a year-end event held at the Tugu Church. It begins with a joint prayer and is followed by a speech from the traditional elder to give an order requiring members of community to forgive each other for mistakes made during the year they have lived. Keroncong becomes a pivotal identity for the Tugis. Keroncong is musical mixture of the Portuguese, African, and Arabic culture. Through the process of acculturation, Keroncong music has been passed down through 3 generations by cultural infiltration for every Mardikas. From a historical perspective, Keroncong came from Fado, which is Portuguese urban music brought by the Portuguese settlers on their eastern voyages. Initially, it was only used a four-string guitar instrument with a length of 50 centimeters called cavaquinho and was played improvisationally with nuance of romantic and poetic verses. This fado was brought by the Portuguese on their voyage into West Africa, Goa, Malacca, and reached Kampung, Tugu. The Portuguese adapted it, local cultural elements, and created the keroncong music. The word keroncong comes from the sound of the guitar instrument, which sounds strong when played. The keroncong music is also used to accompany the dance performance, which is called Noni Tugu dance. Those melodies are Morisco, Ninapopo, Caparino, and Ronga. Morisco comes from the word Morisco, Moor dance, and might be a part of the Moorish art. It might indicate to the medieval Muslims in the Iberian Peninsula. They converted to Christianity and kept their culture. The Christian master expelled them from their countries and forced them to the Iberian continent or Luso and Iberian Empire. The song tells about two separated lovers who want to dance the Morisco once again. Second melody is Nina Popo or lullaby. The word Nina comes from the Portuguese menina or little girl, whereas Popo refers to Chinese Malay word meaning to sleep. The other tune, Cafrinho, might refer to a Goan mestiza or an Africa Negro mestiza, hence the name was derived from the Portuguese word Cafrinho or Cafrinha. The last tune, Pronga, comes from the Portuguese word Prongo, signifying to a singer. The Pronga melody is rarely heard at present, however it might have been popular among the Pandanese slaves in Batavia in the past, called Keroncong Banda. During the 18th century, Portuguese also accommodated the Dutch language into the Luso-Malay musical lyrics. For instance, the song entitled Oud Batavia. Their accommodating ways was to fill the music taste in the Dutch East Indies, in particular in Batavia. Oud Batavia song became the most popular song during the Dutch rule. At present, the keroncong musical groups remain singing the Dutch Malay song. Moving to the culinary hybridity, we have traditional dish from Kampung Tugu. The dish often prepared during communal gathering and celebration, so not only as a form of sustenance, but as a medium through which cultural identity is reinforced and shared. Food and various traditional sweets are emblematic of the village historical roots and contribute to a sense of belonging and continuity among residents, linking them to their Portuguese ancestry and local heritage. Portuguese keep preserving their typical dish based on the local ingredients. They cook ketan unti or white sticky rice covered with grated coconut and brown sugar, kue pisang udang, shrimp banana cake, apam ginca, apam covered with durian soup or brown sugar, and pindang serani tugu, Turkish fish seasoned with spices. Those cuisines would be the culinary hybridity and mandatory dish for the Tugu community at the beginning of Christmas or Ragu-Ragu tradition and the end of Christmas or Mandi Mandi. In addition, the Tugu community also has a type of European cuisine that is a dish at family events such as Tugu meat or dry meat, dried fish, spaghetti, macaroni, egg tart, probably pasta sinata, rollada, and fish stick or Japanese steak. As you can see in the screen, the cake named kue pisang udang, the Tugu community calls it kue pisang udang or shrimp banana cake because the dish is wrapped in banana leaf. The dish is made from rice flour, dough, and contain grated young papaya with shredded shrimp that is seasoned. It tastes very savory. The result of the shredded shrimp in egg mixed with spices and young papaya. The basic dough is similar to Nakasari cake in Java and wrapped in banana leaves with triangular folds. The other culinary hybrid is pindang serani. It's a culinary dish made from fish or known as pes from Portuguese word. The culinary tradition aspect of pindang serani can be seen in the process of hunting or obtaining food ingredients reflecting the cultural tradition of the Portuguese descendants community in the 17th century in Batavia. The process of cultural and knowledge exchange between European and local communities in the early modern period resulted in a mixture of cooking and dressing style as a manifestation of the Martika's culture. In the 17th century, as you can see in the screen, Portuguese cultural elements such as clothing blended into the lives of the Martika. The mixed clothing culture between Portuguese and Asian style became characteristic of the Martikas, namely wearing Portuguese clothes, white hats, but no shoes. This way of dressing developed into cultural identity of Tugu community. In addition, it is evidence of the fusion of two different cultural elements that were able to form a new identity in Batavia. The Tugu community, as descendant of the Portuguese, became part of the European community in Batavia. The Portuguese were also influenced by the Dutch lifestyle. Some Portuguese adapted the Dutch way of dressing, namely wearing black hats, headbands, jackets, body scarf, socks, and shoes. The women wore long kabayas, preferably white, with puff sleeves, closed with small button at the wrist. A sort of a blouse was used for informal wear. By around the turn of the 19th century, women wore a saya from Portuguese saya, a long skirt of white and color-printed kaftan, finely pleated and heavily starched. There was no difference between Mardicas and the other Christian in the kampungs of Batavia in terms of apparel worn. The other hybrid identity we can see from material culture of the church. The material culture represented by the Tuguese church and tombstone significantly marks and expresses the identity of Kampung Tugu. The Tugu Church, established in 1678, served not only as a religious center, but also a crucial emblem of the cultural heritage binding the villages together. It maintains the Christian rituals and cultural practice that define their identity. After conquering Malacca and controlling the Asian trade network, the Dutch brought many Portuguese-speaking and black-skinned people to become slaves in Batavia. This mixed black people were called mestizo. The Dutch brought the mestizo people from Malacca and India after they occupied former Portuguese ports and shipping routes. The Dutch didn't allow mestizo people to practice their religion, despite experiencing tight security. These people initially still brought a statue of the Virgin Mary to Batavia. The Dutch gave freedom to these people if they converted to Christianity. Therefore, they were nicknamed the Mardika and were given an area to live in the Tugu area. Although most of the Mardika had converted to Protestantism, they called the church the Portuguese church. In 1633, the first church was built from woven bamboo together and clay. The establishment of the first church, named the Portuguese church in the city of Hinakaf, influenced the social life in Kampung Tugu. In 1661, 23 Mardika's family received land around the same area close to the Batavia castle. The Dutch placed them on the outskirts of Batavia castle, intending to be the first defense if there was an attack on the Batavia castle from outside. Although many of them were Protestant, the Mardika secretly participated in the celebration of the Holy Mass Day. To the east of the walls of the Batavia castle, there was a Portuguese church building built by the Dutch. Initially, this church was built as a place of religious learning. Due to the rapid development of Protestantism among the people of Tugu village, a stone church was consecrated outside the walls in 1678. However, it was mainly used by the Portuguese. This church later burned down, and a bamboo church was built outside of the fortress walls on the east side, where there were large congregation of both Mardika and Christian native. It was eventually reconstructed in stone and consecrated in 1695. Construction of the church was carried out under the authority of headmaster or church president, namely Juan van Horn. This church was later named the Portuguese church outside the city. During the 18th century, the Portuguese kept serving the Dutch master as the military forces. They secure Batavia and its surrounding from the Chinese rebellion, or we call in Indonesia as Geger Pecinan, in 1740. Consequently, the Chinese also destroyed the Tugu building, including the Tugu church, renovated in 1738. In 1744, the church was rebuilt in the same location around the Tugu village, later named the Tugu Church. The construction of this church was funded by an owner named Justin Pick. Since 1748, the Mardika had celebrated worship in two languages, namely Malay and Portuguese. The Mardika also used the church as a school as well. Due to their disordered life, the Tuguese could maintain the sustainability of their cultural heritage. However, in the early 19th century, there was only one priest who used Portuguese. The Portuguese culture and language among the Marticas began to fade. Even the old Marticas houses were used as stone quarries to build new houses in the southern area. At the present day, there are only remnants of the Tugu community. Even the Tugu church has now changed to GPIP Emmanuel. The GPIP Emmanuel complex has several buildings entering the main door. Toward the south, we can see the security post, church office, parking area, funeral home, hall, consistory, canteen, IKPT secretariat, performing art theaters on the west side, and parking area, cemetery, church bell, hall, and school on the east side. Besides the church, the 19th and 20th century tombstone also preserve the Portuguese identity in Kampung Tugu. However, they are mostly Protestant, but they keep following Catholic tradition. They visit their relative tombstone and light the candles on Christmas night, as the church, the graveyard, represent the religious symbol. Recently, there have been 372 graves. 7 surnames of Abraham, Michel, Kiko, Cornelius, Brown, Andres, and Solomon are depicted in the Tugu's tombstone. There are no tombstones of good quality. In general, tombstones are made of ordinary stone. This indicates that the bodies buried are low-ranking official or ordinary civilian. However, like the other tombstone of high-ranking official, the tombstone in Kampung Tugu also have verbal signs containing full name, birthplace, birth date, place, date, and verses from the Bible. On the tombstone of Frederick Abraham, there is the inscription of John 11 and 25. It states, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection of the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And whoever live and believe in me will never die. This passage could be understood differently. First, this passage highlights his unique authority over death and his ability to keep eternal life. The verse also promises that those who believe in Jesus will live forever even after death. This passage offers comfort and hope to believers in the face of death, assuring them of a future life with Jesus. It could be used and in the context of the world afterlife. It might represent the bereaved family's hope and that someone who has died can live eternally by Jesus' side. In addition to inscription from the Bible, tombstones also have various symbols. For symbols, you can see at the screen, horses, crosses, angel with trumpet, and guitar are often found on the tombstone in the Kampung Tugu. Horses symbolize harmonious love, and 8 petal wand symbolize purity spreading to the 8 corners of the compass. The cross symbolize compassion for fellow human being for horizontal line and love for the creator for vertical lines. The cross symbolize Christian faith. Angel symbolize trusted guardian of salvation. Trumpets refers to the disease from the Hon family in the context of Kampung Tugu. Trumpet may symbolize a sign of the presence of the day of the death. To be concluded, for centuries the Martica, later people call them Portuguese or Orang Tugu, lived in a plural society from the Dutch colonialism to the Indonesian independence. The global interaction has allowed them to exchange their culture and create hybrid identities. The Tugis, as a worldwide community, represent its hybridity from its language, music, fashion, culinary, and material culture. In preserving the richness of Tugis culture, the stakeholder should document, transmit, and exhibit the Tugis culture continuously. We have launched and published a documentary movie of Tugis culture. Furthermore, Tugis culture should be promoted creatively and innovatively to attract wider audience. The stakeholder right now should also care for and improve the life quality of the cultural preservator by a pivotal role in sustaining their daily cultural activity. Thank you so much for your attention and good morning.